Toxic leadership. You probably heard that term. And I received so many emails. I had so many discussions online and offline. The term now is all over the place, and we have to get hold of what toxic leadership really is. Because the vast majority of claims out there, meanwhile, are false and reflect on something which might be in a certain way not pleasant to you. However, we have to define what really is toxic leadership and where is the line that it's not toxic leadership, something which might not be your favorable behavior. However, it is still an acceptable way of leadership. Where does toxic leadership begin and where does it end? What are the boundaries? Welcome to this week's episode. We're going to talk about toxic leadership. Very important, of course, is when we talk about toxic leadership, the first question always is there a scientific definition of toxic leadership? And here the good news, there is. Very important is when we talk about the definition, it means someone has defined at a certain point in time what toxic leadership is. And the first definition was by Marcia Linwicker, and the definition was maladjusted, malcontent, and often malevolent persons who succeed by tearing others down. So it's a very interpersonal aspect here. We see that this is about certain people who succeed in tearing others down. However, today, in the newest definition by John Lipman Blumen, you will find a more behavioral approach and also a way more detailed definition. So let's look into that here. Toxic leadership refers to leadership behavior that inflicts serious and enduring harm on followers, organizations, or institutions through dysfunctional personal characteristics and destructive behaviors. So we see it is behaviors. And as we can all see, behaviors on the one hand can change, but dysfunctional personal characteristics, the question is, can we really change that? The main issue right now is that at the moment, because there is toxic leadership out there, there's no question there is a massive amount of toxic leadership out there. However, the discussion at the moment gets kidnapped by people who use the term in a wildly wrong way. So let's say you have an application. Let's say someone says, look, Mrs. Schubert, look, Mr. Miller, when when everything gets a bit stressful, I'm getting pretty loud and I can be shouty at you. It's nothing personal. This is just how I am, you know. Let's just take this statement. Someone gives that statement to you. And often people say, look, just last week, my leader approached me and said, I didn't meet the goals. And that was really unpleasant. It's really unpleasant. Didn't make me feel comfortable. That's toxic leadership. I didn't feel comfortable, so it's toxic leadership. Hint, this is not toxic leadership. We have a massive amount of malattribution out there. Just because you personally consider something unpleasant does not mean that something really is toxic leadership. We distinguish between toxic leadership and tough leadership. Tough leadership means you have high standards, a direct way of communicating, you hold people accountable. When they achieve something, there is usually a bonus in there, and when they don't, there's the opposite, a malus in there, and you will face negative consequences. When someone says, look, you should do 50 phone calls a day in this call center, and you only had 42. We had 1, 2, 3 talks with you. We had 1, 2, 3 promises from you. We gave you help in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 12 cases, and you didn't change in the slightest. We are now thinking about letting you go or firing you. That is not toxic leadership just because you consider it personally unpleasant. Here are the bad news, if you want to call it bad news. If you think that the workplace always has to appease to being the most pleasant place on earth, in a perfect world, that probably could happen, but in reality, it does not. Just because sometimes it feels a bit stressful, sometimes it feels a bit not so nice, that does not mean it is toxic leadership. Be aware of that because it is crucially important to know that not everything that you do not like is automatically toxic leadership. So when we get to toxic leadership, because now we have to see the reality here. The reality is this is deeply rooted in personalities. As soon as you have people who say things like, oh, you know, back in those days, we wouldn't even hire those people. I mean, look at this person. He's working at a bank now. Do you know where this person comes from? People from these cities, from these part of town, wouldn't even get through the door back in the days. So someone is humiliating someone based on where they come from, who they are, who they were born as, and suddenly says, you are not worth to be here. That's the definition of toxic leadership behavior. That's one part of it. When people say, you are not worth anything as a human being, you're a loser in life, that is toxic behavior. When people tell you, look, we agreed on your sales goals, you had to get in £500,000 and you got in £350,000, and it's the third year in a row where you do not meet your sales goals, despite all the talks we had, all the help we gave you, and all the promises you made. We now have to talk about consequences. That's not toxic leadership just because it feels personally unpleasant to you. The toxicity of something is defined by reasoning. When someone can give you reasoning, doesn't yell or shout at you, or crosses any personal line towards you of inadequate or even indecent behavior, then we do not talk about toxic leadership. Toxic leadership crosses these lines. They humiliate you. They make you devalue yourself as a human being. They talk you into self-blame. They cross the line of inadequate or even indecent behavior. They sometimes even cross the line and violate the law. That is toxic behavior or even illegal behavior. The toxicity needs to be defined properly because when in real world application, you start to call every minor inconvenience, and believe me, I am not going to be the bloke who tells you, oh, all the work has to be hard, only hard work pays off. No, that's not the message. However, when everything you consider unpleasant is toxic, the game will very quickly capture on the other side as well. And they will say, oh, we're a corporation. I'm a CEO. I feel really unpleasant when I pay my taxes. No, I'd rather not to. That's toxic leadership by the state, isn't it? And no, it's not. The real world application here needs to hover around the scientific definition and the facts we can get together with excellent reasoning on top of that. If you then wonder, how can we now implement this in an organization when you think that sounds rather tricky? I can tell you it's not easy. However, when you implement this in your organization, it simply means, first, of course, you have to get an awareness for that. People need to be aware that there are two types of leadership in general, and you can be, if you want to be, it wouldn't be my approach, but you can be on tough leadership. If you want to do that, up to you. Maybe not the most preferred style for many, but it can work in certain circumstances. However, people need to know where is the line to toxic leadership. Phrases you should not say, phrases you cannot say. Where does the law draw the line? Where do people draw the line? Where do we all find together to a workplace where we all like to work? Because as soon as you overstep the mark to toxic leadership, you have a social delegitimization, which means when you are socially delegitimized, no one's going to follow you in the future. Material will be leaked, your reputation goes down the drain, and everything gets worse from there for absolutely anyone. And as soon as you have the awareness, we now have to see that unfortunately, many leaders have not learned how to lead people. I give you a very simple example. When you have to lead salespeople and you don't know how, and you become a really nasty person, you basically terrorize people psychologically, and suddenly you see, oh, they're now meeting their sales goals. Then you condition yourself to believe, oh, this is how it needs to be. This is how leadership is. Need to be nasty so people meet their goals, right? Because they just did. No, no. You don't know any better. However, this is still toxic leadership when you cross that line. You need to teach people how to lead people properly. And these kind of leadership coaching, etc., needs to be done professionally. It's not going to be a 15-minute online class which you do during your lunch break. The qualification needs to be there. Leadership needs to be learned. Only when people properly learn how to be leaders, are properly qualified on the matter, and then see where is the line to toxic leadership, then they can do something about that. The qualification clearly shows the way people need to learn the toolbox to be excellent leaders. Because as soon as they do, they very quickly see with different leadership styles, we all need to work together on the goal, meaning, obviously, that we need to have an agreement overall. We need to have an agreement overall how to work together on this matter. And as soon as you say, we do it the way that it's done well, from tough leadership, away from toxic leadership, from tough leadership to any kind of more soft leadership approach, then everything will be better in your organization as well. And I wish you all the best implementing this in your organization. And when you now say, I have a couple of questions here, feel free to get in touch anytime. So first, of course, when you watch me on YouTube right now, leave a like here. And of course, it would be really nice if you subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much for doing so. Leave a comment here. Always lovely to have discussions. And of course, when you listen to me on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, feel free to leave a review there as well. 5 stars would be much appreciated. Thank you very much for doing so. And of course, recommend these channels, the podcast, the video cast, the YouTube channel, Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever else, anywhere, online, offline, amongst your friends, colleagues, absolutely anywhere. An additional aspect which we have only on YouTube are the YouTube Shorts. I gave you the promise at the beginning of the year. I will have one leadership tip online every single day of the year. We're doing very well with that. So far, we're having 1, 2, 3, 4 tips per day. So it really pays off to not only subscribe to my YouTube channel, but also put the little bell in there so you get the tiny information, tiny notification either on your smartphone or on your computer when something new is up. You can, of course, also follow me. Apple Podcasts and Spotify is the way to go. When you now say, hey, we really need someone in this area, we need a trainer, speaker, coach, consultant, mentor, project or interim manager, feel free to get in touch, nb-networks.biz. I'm looking forward to seeing you on my website, or just text me an email directly, nb@nb-networks.com. Write me some lines, write me an email. If you just want to have some questions, let's just chat. If you want to have a suggestion for a new topic, send me an email. If you want to do a booking, send me an email as well. We're open for absolutely everything. If you now wonder, are there live sessions? Yes, there are. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, put your email address in there. You receive only one email every Wednesday morning. No worries, it's 100% content, ad-free guarantee. And there you see in the English and German language, more than 500 episodes in each language available with podcasts, with video casts, with articles, everything free access, no charge whatsoever for our readers. And only via the leadership letter we communicate the live sessions. So the live session is only communicated via the leadership letter. It really pays off because in this leadership letter, you find the date, the time, and the access link, so you can then join our leadership Q&As. And of course, feel free to get in touch with me on social media as well. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't do the follow thing. Do a proper connect. I'm looking forward to being connected with you. You can, of course, follow me on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on Instagram. You can leave a like on Facebook if you like, or you can just subscribe to the YouTube channel, or all of the above. I'm looking forward to being in touch. Lots of more excellent content to come. At the end of this podcast and videocast, however, there are always two things I say. First, when you get in touch, you get a really quick answer. I guarantee you an answer within 24 hours or less. Second, very important is apply what you see in this podcast, because only when you apply what you learn, you will see the positive aspect that you obviously want to see in your organization. And last but not least, there's only one thing left for me to say at the end of this podcast and the end of this video cast. When you apply everything, everything will get better. So apply what you learn. I wish you all the best. And for today, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.